The fluorescent lights of the Northwood Mall always made me feel a little sick, like I was trapped in some giant, sterile aquarium. But today, the nausea churning in my gut had nothing to do with the lighting. It was pure, unadulterated fear. Sergeant Miller, a man whose belly strained the buttons of his security uniform, had me by the arm, his grip like a vice, in my other hand, still clutched stupidly, was the Astro Warrior X500 action figure, its plastic packaging crinkling with every terrified tremor that ran through me. I was 14, and I'd just been caught shoplifting. A stupid, impulsive decision. The X500 wasn't even that cool. I expected yelling. I expected the police. I expected my dad, Robert, to be called. His disappointment a heavier blow than any physical punishment. What I didn't expect was my mum, Diane, walking into the mall security office with an expression that was unnervingly calm. Sergeant Miller, clearly relieved to pass the buck, explained the situation. Mum listened, her face a mask. She paid for the toy, apologized profusely, and then led me out to the car. Her silence more terrifying than any lecture. The drive home was a masterclass in psychological tension. I kept waiting for the explosion, the grounding, the loss of my Xbox for a millennia. Nothing. When we got home, she finally spoke, her voice soft, almost gentle, which somehow made it worse. Michael, she began, I'm not going to ground you. I'm not going to take away your privileges. A wave of relief so potent it almost made me dizzy washed over me. Maybe she understood. Maybe she knew I'd just made a dumb mistake. Instead, she continued, her eyes locking onto mine with an intensity that sent a shiver down my spine. We're going to try something different, a punishment that will, I hope, teach you a more profound lesson about considering how your actions impact others, and about empathy. I swallowed, my throat suddenly dry. What? What kind of punishment? She smiled then, a slow, strange curve of her lips. Whenever you are in this house, Michael, you will be dressed as a girl. I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. This had to be a joke, right? A really twisted, unfunny joke. What, Mom? That's crazy. You can't be serious. Her smile didn't waver. Oh, I'm perfectly serious. Michael, there are rules. Of course. She ticked them off on her fingers, as if discussing chores. Rule number 1, you will wear dresses or skirts. You will wear appropriate female undergarments. You will wear ladies' shoes. You will wear makeup, foundation, blush, lipstick, mascara, the works. And you will wash your hair with my scented shampoo and conditioner. My jaw dropped. Makeup-scented shampoo, Mum. This is insane. I'm a boy. Rule number 2. She went on, ignoring my outburst. When you are dressed according to rule number 1, you will no longer be Michael. You will be Melissa, and you will be referred to as Melissa. You will respond to Melissa. Melissa. The name hit me like a physical blow. It sounded alien. Wrong. Melissa. Why Melissa? I stammered, a knot of dread tightening in my stomach. It's a pretty name, don't you think? She said airily. And rule number 3, any attempt to circumvent these rules, any defiance, any unladylike behavior while you are Melissa, will result in the punishment escalating, drastically. Escalating how? I whispered, my voice barely audible. Her eyes, which I now realized held a glint I'd never seen before, something cold and determined, narrowed. Let's just say, if you don't cooperate, your classmates at Northwood High might receive some rather illuminating photographs of Melissa in her prettiest dress. Do we understand each other? Michael. The threat hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. Pictures. At school. The thought was so horrifying, so mortifying, that it eclipsed everything else. My reputation. My friendships. Everything would be destroyed. I was a fairly average kid. I played basketball, hung out with my buddies, tried and mostly failed to talk to girls. This would obliterate that. You wouldn't, I choked out, but even as I said it, I knew she would. That cold glint in her eye told me everything I needed to know. Try me, she said softly. Now, Melissa needs her first outfit. I laid something out for you in your room. My room, my sanctuary. Now, apparently, a dressing room for this nightmare persona. I walked upstairs in a daze, my legs feeling like lead. On my bed, neatly folded, was a pale blue sundress with little white flowers, a pair of white lace-trimmed panties, a training bra that looked ridiculously flimsy, and a pair of white patent leather Mary Jane shoes with a tiny heel. Beside them, a makeup bag overflowed with products I didn't recognize, and a bottle of shampoo that smelled overwhelmingly of gardenias. I just stood there, staring. This couldn't be happening. It was a prank. She'd walk in any second, laughing, and say, "Gotcha!" But the silence from downstairs stretched on, punctuated only by the ticking of the grandfather clock in the hall, a sound that suddenly seemed to be counting down the seconds to my utter humiliation. Michael, or should I say, Melissa, Mum's voice called from the foot of the stairs. Are you decent yet? Dinner will be ready soon, and Melissa is expected to help set the table. My hands were shaking. I picked up the panties. They felt silky, alien. The dress was soft, but the thought of the fabric against my skin made me want to retch. This wasn't just a punishment. It was a systematic dismantling of everything I was. I tried to argue, to reason with her when I went back downstairs, still in my jeans and t-shirt. Mom, please, I'll do anything. I'll do chores for a year. I'll get a job and pay you back 10 times over for the stupid toy. Just, not this. She just looked at me, her expression unyielding. The rules are clear. Michael, don't make me escalate things on the very first day. She held up her phone, a silent, potent reminder of her threat. Defeated, I trudged back upstairs. The first time I tried to put on the bra, I fumbled with the clasps for what felt like an eternity. The panties felt weird. Too tight in some places, too loose in others. The dress, when I finally pulled it over my head, felt like a costume for a play I never auditioned for. It swished around my knees. A constant, unwelcome reminder. The Mary Janes pinched my toes. Then came the makeup. I had no idea what I was doing. I smeared foundation on my face, making my skin look pasty. The lipstick was a garish pink. The mascara clumped my eyelashes. When I finally looked in the mirror, a grotesque parody of a girl stared back at me. My short, boyish hair, now smelling faintly of gardenias, only amplified the absurdity. Melissa, dear, Mom called. Table. Taking a deep breath. I opened my bedroom door. Each step down the stairs was an agony of self-consciousness. The swish of the dress, the slight click of the Mary Janes on the wooden steps, the unfamiliar scent of flowers clinging to me. It was all a sensory assault. When I entered the kitchen, Mum smiled. "Oh, Melissa, you look lovely," she said, though her eyes held that same calculating glint. "A bit messy with the makeup, but we can work on that. Practice makes perfect." I wanted to scream. I wanted to rip the ridiculous dress off. I wanted to run. But the image of those photos, shared with the entire school, kept me rooted to the spot. A prisoner in my own home, in my own skin. This wasn't just a punishment. It was the beginning of a war for my own identity. And I had a sinking feeling I was already losing. The first few days as Melissa were a blur of awkwardness and shame. Every morning, I'd wake up as Mike, a brief, blissful moment of normalcy before the weight of my reality crashed down. Then came the ritual, the floral-scented shower, the fumbling with strange undergarments, the selection of a dress from the rapidly growing wardrobe Mum was acquiring, mostly from thrift stores. Cheap, frilly things that made my skin crawl, and the clumsy application of makeup under her watchful eye. She'd help, her fingers dabbing at my face, her voice cooing instructions. Blend it, Melissa, blend it. A young lady always ensures her foundation is smooth. My younger brother, Danny, was the first major complication. He was 10, and up until the incident, as I'd started calling my shoplifting bust, I'd been the typical older brother, occasionally protective, mostly a tormentor. He'd always been a bit of a tattletale, a whiner, someone I could easily intimidate. Not anymore. The first time he saw me as Melissa, dressed in a yellow gingham sundress with matching yellow ribbons Mum had insisted on tying into my short hair, his jaw dropped. Then, a slow, malicious grin spread across his face, the kind of grin that promised trouble. What are you wearing?" he snickered. "Quiet. Danny," Mum said sharply from the kitchen. "Melissa is going through a phase. We support her." A phase support her. My stomach twisted. She was building a narrative, a false reality. And I was the unwilling star. Danny, however, saw an opportunity. The power dynamic between us had flipped. I was no longer the intimidating older brother. I was Melissa, a figure of ridicule. He started small, snide comments under his breath, exaggeratedly polite. "Excuse me, Melissa's." But then he got bolder. He had a cheap little digital camera he'd gotten for his birthday. One afternoon, I was in the living room, forced to watch some sappy rom-com with Mum, part of Melissa's feminine education. She'd called it, wearing a particularly hideous pink ruffled dress. I must have dozed off. I woke up to a click. Danny stood in the doorway, camera in hand, that evil grin plastered on his face. "Nice dress, Melissa," he taunted, waving the camera. "Bet your friends at school would love to see this, Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through me. "Danny, don't you dare give me that camera!" I lunged for him, forgetting for a moment the restrictive dress and the slippery-soled flats I was wearing. I stumbled, and he easily dodged me, laughing. "What's wrong, Melissa, afraid someone will see how pretty you are?" Mum walked in then. "Daniel, what's going on?" "Nothing. Mom," he said, quickly hiding the camera behind his back. "Just talking to Melissa." She looked from him to my tear-streaked, angry face. "Melissa, dear, such unladylike behavior. A young lady doesn't shout or make grabby hands." I wanted to scream that Danny was the one out of line, that he was blackmailing me. But what could I say? That I didn't want to be seen in a dress that would only confirm my defiance. And Mom's threat about the school photos still loomed large. Danny now had his own leverage, his own little collection of humiliating images. He'd accidentally leave printouts in places I'd find them, or hum feminine tunes when I walked by. He was reveling in my misery. My own brother had become another jailer. The true nightmare, however, arrived a few weeks later, disguised as a celebration. "Melissa," Mama announced one evening, "I'm having a few of my colleagues over from the library for a little get-together next Saturday. A sort of afternoon tea. And you, my dear, will be our hostess. My blood ran cold. Hostess Mom! No! I can't, please! These were strangers. Adults. Women who worked with her. Nonsense, Melissa. It will be good practice for you. Social graces are very important for a young lady. Her tone brooked no argument. The week leading up to the party was torture. Mum bought a new dress for the occasion, a monstrosity of taffeta and lace, powder pink, with a ridiculously full skirt that made me look like a deranged cupcake. She even bought a cheap, synthetic wig, a cascade of blonde curls that felt itchy and hot. To complete the look, she'd chirped. On the day of the party, she spent an hour on my makeup, applying it with a professional precision that was terrifying. Smoky eyeshadow, perfectly winged eyeliner, a deep rose lipstick. The blonde wig was pinned securely to my hair. When I looked in the mirror, I barely recognized the stranger staring back. The reflection was a feminine caricature, a doll with haunted eyes. Her colleagues arrived, a gaggle of middle-aged women, Mrs. P.R. Summers-Peterson, Ms. E.R. Albright, and Miss Finch. They cooed and fussed when Mum introduced me. And this is my daughter, Melissa. Isn't she a doll? Oh, Diane, she's lovely, Mrs. Peterson gushed, her eyes crinkling. Such beautiful hair. She reached out to pat the wig. I flinched. I had to serve them tea and little cucumber sandwiches, my hands shaking so badly I nearly dropped the tray. They asked me questions. What grade are you in, Melissa? Dear, do you have a boyfriend yet? What are your hobbies, sweetie? I mumbled non-committal answers, my voice barely a squeak, focusing all my energy on not bursting into tears or throwing the teapot through the window. Every compliment felt like a tiny, sharp needle. Every smile felt like a jeer. They took pictures. For the library newsletter, Mum said brightly, snapping a photo of me awkwardly holding a plate of cookies, the flash temporarily blinding me. I could feel their eyes on me, a mixture of curiosity and pity, perhaps even amusement. The humiliation was a physical weight, crushing me. Danny, of course, hovered in the background, smirking, undoubtedly cataloguing every mortifying detail. The worst part was Mum. She was so normal, so charming and cheerful, playing the proud mother. It was a performance, and I was her unwilling prop. As I poured tea, my hand brushed hers, and for a fleeting second, her grip tightened on my arm, a silent warning. Play along. Or else. After what felt like an eternity, they left, full of praise for darling Melissa and her impeccable manners. As soon as the door closed, I ripped off the itchy wig, my scalp prickling with sweat. Don't be so dramatic, Melissa, Mum said, already starting to clear the teacups. You did very well. They all thought you were charming. Charming. I felt like I had been flayed alive. The fear of public exposure was constant. A few days after the party, Mum needed some specific brand of herbal tea she could only find at a health food store across town. Melissa, be a dear and run to Good Earth Organics for me. Would you? Here's the list and my card. She handed me a frilly little purse. In this, I was wearing a lilac skirt and a matching blouse, with white sandals. My makeup was subtle, but undeniably there. Of course, dear, how else would Melissa go? The thought of going out in public like this, in broad daylight, was terrifying. But arguing was futile. The drive there was agony. Every car that passed felt like it was full of pointing, laughing people. I parked as far from the entrance as possible, pulled the brim of a sun hat Mum had insisted I wear lower over my eyes, and scurried inside. The store was small, thankfully not too crowded. I found the tea quickly, my head down, avoiding eye contact. As I stood in line at the checkout, I heard a familiar voice. "Mike, is that you?" My heart leaped into my throat. I froze. Slowly, I turned. It was Sarah Jenkins, a girl from my math class. She was staring at me, her brow furrowed in confusion. She wasn't looking at my face, which was mostly obscured by the hat, but at my clothes, my general outline. My mind raced. Deny it. Run. Pretend you didn't hear. But before I could say anything, her mum called her from another aisle. "Sarah, honey, did you find the almond butter?" "Coming, Mum." She gave me one last puzzled look and hurried off. She hadn't recognized me. Not really. The hat. The different silhouette. The sheer improbability of it. It had thrown her off. I paid for the tea, my hands trembling, and practically ran back to the car. I'd dodged a bullet, a massive one, but it was a stark reminder my secret was precariously balanced on a knife's edge. One wrong move, one unlucky encounter, and my world would come crashing down. The mall. The party. Danny's threats. The near miss at the grocery store. It was all building. A relentless tide of shame threatening to drown me. A sliver of hope arrived in an email. My dad, Robert, was coming for his biannual visit. He and Mom had divorced when I was 8, and he'd moved to Oregon a few years later for a job. He wasn't around much, but his visits were usually a highlight. Camping trips, ball games, a blissful escape from Mom's increasingly suffocating presence. This time, he was planning to take me and Danny on a weekend camping trip up by Bear Lake. Camping, masculinity, freedom. The words sang in my head. Surely, Mom wouldn't try to extend her bizarre Melissa charade to my dad. He'd see right through it. He'd put a stop to it. He was my dad. He was supposed to protect me. The week before his arrival, I tried to be the model Melissa. I was demure, helpful, and didn't complain once about the floral print dresses or the nightly ritual of having Mum brush Melissa's hair, which, to my horror, she was letting grow out, trimming it into a soft, page boy style. I was banking everything on Dad's intervention. The night before he was due to arrive, Mum laid out an outfit that made my stomach clench. It wasn't one of the usual girlish sundresses. It was a formal dress. Deep burgundy velvet, with long sleeves and a flowing skirt. It looked like something a girl would wear to a school dance. "For dinner with your father, Melissa," she said, her voice smooth as silk. "We want to make a good impression, don't we?" "Mom, he's my dad. He knows me. I don't need to make an impression. And he's expecting Mike. Not this." "Nonsense, dear. He hasn't seen you in 6 months. He'll be so surprised to see how much you've blossomed." There was that cold glint in her eye again. She insisted on elaborate makeup. Foundation, concealer, a smoky eye with false lashes, and dark red lipstick. She even produced a pair of low-heeled pumps that matched the dress. When she was done, I looked in the mirror and felt a wave of despair. This wasn't just Melissa anymore. This was a full-blown theatrical production. Then came the worst part. As she was adjusting a stray curl she'd used a curling iron on my now slightly longer hair, she looked at me in the mirror, her expression unreadable. "Melissa, dear, when your father arrives, I need you to do something for me." "What?" I asked, my voice hoarse. "I need you to tell him that this is what you want, that you enjoy being Melissa, that you prefer it." I recoiled as if she'd struck me. "What? No, I can't, Mom. That's a lie. I hate this. You know I hate this." Her grip tightened on my shoulders, her nails digging in slightly. Listen to me very carefully. Michael, she hissed, her voice dropping the sweet Melissa pretense for a moment. Your father and I have different perspectives on parenting. If he thinks I'm forcing you, he could make things very difficult. He could try to take you away. And if he does that, I will make sure those photos reach every single person you know. Your friends. Your teachers, that pretty little Sarah Jenkins from your math class. Do you understand? You will tell him you like being a girl. You will convince him. The threat was absolute. Her leverage total, my hope, which had been a tiny, flickering candle, was snuffed out. Dad arrived right on time, his familiar old pickup truck rattling into the driveway. Danny, of course, ran out to greet him, all smiles and excitement. I hung back, rooted to the spot in the living room, feeling the heavy velvet of the dress clinging to me like a shroud. I heard his booming laugh, then his footsteps in the hall. Mikey, where's my big guy? He walked into the living room, a duffel bag slung over his shoulder, a wide grin on his face. And then he saw me. The grin froze. His eyes widened, sweeping over me from the curled hair to the heeled pumps. Confusion warred with disbelief on his face. Mike! What in God's name? Mum swept in, all maternal warmth. Robert, so good to see you. Doesn't Melissa look lovely? Dad stared from me to Mum and back again, his face darkening. Diane, what is this? What have you done to him? His voice was low, angry. Done. Mum feigned surprise. Robert, this was Melissa's idea. She's been exploring her feminine side. She told me she feels more comfortable this way. She turned to me, her eyes boring into mine. A silent command. Isn't that right? Melissa, dear, tell your father. This was it. The moment of truth. My chance to scream for help. To expose her. But the image of those photos, the thought of my life at school being utterly destroyed, paralyzed me. Dad was looking at me, waiting, a flicker of hope in his eyes. I could see he wanted me to deny it, to tell him this was all Mom's crazy idea. I opened my mouth, but the words wouldn't come. I could feel Mom's stare, a physical pressure. I looked down at my velvet-clad knees, at the stupid, delicate shoes. A tear escaped and traced a path through the heavy foundation on my cheek. Melissa, Dad prompted, his voice softer now, laced with a desperate hope. I took a shaky breath. It's true, Dad, I mumbled, the lie tasting like ash in my mouth. I like wearing dresses. I like being Melissa. Each word was a betrayal of myself, a nail in my own coffin. The silence that followed was deafening. I couldn't look at him. I could feel his gaze on me, feel the weight of his disappointment. When he finally spoke, his voice was flat, devoid of emotion. I see. Mum seized the advantage. She's been so much happier. Robert really blossomed. We were just talking about enrolling her in some ballet classes, weren't we? Sweetie. I nodded numbly, feeling sick. Dad didn't stay for dinner. He made some excuse about needing to get an early start for a meeting he'd forgotten about back in Oregon. He said the camping trip would have to be another time. He hugged Danny goodbye, a long, tight hug. He looked at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of confusion, pain, and something I couldn't quite decipher, maybe disgust. He just nodded curtly. Take care, Melissa. Then he turned and walked out, Danny trailing forlornly after him to the truck. I watched from the window as his pickup pulled away. My last chance for rescue disappearing down the street. He hadn't even tried to fight for me. He'd believed her. Or he'd believed my coerced lie. Or maybe he just didn't want to deal with the mess. Either way, he was gone. Mom came up behind me and put her hands on my shoulders. "You did very well, Melissa," she said, her voice triumphant. "Very well indeed. Now, let's clear the table. It wouldn't do for a young lady to leave a mess." I felt hollowed out, utterly alone. My father, my supposed protector, had abandoned me. He'd left me to her, to Melissa. The velvet dress felt impossibly heavy, the makeup a suffocating mask. The hope that had sustained me was gone, replaced by a despair so profound it felt like a physical ache in my chest. There was no escape. With Dad gone, and my last lifeline severed, something inside me began to crumble. The fight, the outrage, the desperate hope for rescue, it all started to drain away, leaving behind a dull, aching resignation. What was the point of resisting? Mom had won. She had all the power. My life became a carefully curated performance. At home, I was Melissa. I wore the dresses, the makeup, the increasingly feminine hairstyles Mum dictated. I even started to get better at it. My makeup application became smoother, less like a clown's. I learned to walk in low heels without wobbling too much. I could almost sound convincing when I pitched my voice slightly higher to answer the phone as Melissa. The real world, the world outside our front door, was a minefield. The fear of discovery was a constant companion. One afternoon, Mom decided Melissa needed some fresh air and exercise. "A walk in the park, dear. It'll do you good." She dressed me in a denim skirt, a pink t-shirt, and sneakers. Girl sneakers, of course. Pastel pink with sparkly laces. My hair was tied back in pigtails. I was walking near the duck pond, trying to be as inconspicuous as possible, when I heard them. "Hey, look, it's Mikey." My blood turned to ice. It was Mark, Kevin, and Josh, guys from my old basketball team. My friends, or former friends. As it was about to become, they were approaching. Smirks already on their faces. There was nowhere to run. "What's with the get-up, Mike?" Mark jeered, his eyes raking over my outfit. "Lost a bet." "Playing dress-up." "Freak," Kevin chimed in, shoving Josh playfully. Panic clawed at my throat. I tried to stammer an explanation. Something, anything, but my mind was blank with terror. Josh, bolder than the others, stepped forward and tugged hard on my denim skirt. There was a ripping sound. The skirt, cheaply made, tore away, leaving me standing there in my plain white panties and the pink t-shirt. Laughter erupted, cruel and loud. They pointed, they jeered. "Look at Mikey's panties. What a perv." Tears of shame and fury streamed down my face. I wanted the ground to swallow me whole. I wanted to disappear. And then, like a twisted fairy godmother, Mom appeared. She must have been following me. "Boys! Boys! What is all this commotion?" she asked, her voice full of feigned surprise and concern. She rushed to my side, pulling a light cardigan from her bag and wrapping it around my waist to cover my exposed legs and underwear. "Mrs. Henderson," Mark said, still snickering. "Mike's wearing girl clothes." Mom put an arm around my shoulders, pulling me close. "Oh, you boys," she said, shaking her head with a sigh that sounded almost genuine. "My Michael. Well, Melissa, as she prefers to be called now. She's just exploring her identity. She finds comfort in expressing her feminine side. We need to be supportive, don't we?" Their jaws dropped. The laughter died in their throats, replaced by stunned, confused silence. Mom was publicly validating the nightmare. She was painting me not as a victim of a bizarre punishment, but as willingly transgender, or at least deeply gender confused. She ushered me away, leaving them gaping after us. There, Melissa," she cooed. Once we were out of earshot. "Don't you worry about those nasty boys. They just don't understand." But I knew what she'd done. She'd cemented the narrative. Now, if anyone saw me, the explanation was already out there. Mike Henderson was a boy who liked to dress as a girl. The humiliation was complete, public. There was no going back. After that incident, something shifted even further within me. The lines started to blur. Mom enrolled Melissa in a beginner's ballet class with a group of much younger girls. I towered over them, a clumsy giant in a black leotard and pink tights, feeling utterly ridiculous as I tried to plie and pirouette. She also signed me up for a Young Ladies Etiquette and Home Economics summer course. I learned to set a formal table, to make passable scones, and to sew a crooked seam. The more I was forced into this role, the more a strange, insidious thought began to take root. If I had to be Melissa, if this was my life now, shouldn't I at least try to be good at it if I was going to be a girl? Why not try to be a pretty girl? It was a twisted kind of coping mechanism, a desperate attempt to reclaim some agency, even if it was within the confines of her insane rules. I started paying more attention to the fashion magazines Mum left lying around, 17, Teen Vogue. I studied the models, the clothes, the makeup tips. I started experimenting more with the makeup she provided, trying to replicate the looks I saw, trying to make Melissa look less like a caricature and more like a girl. I asked Mum for different shampoos, ones that smelled less like old ladies and more like the fruity concoctions advertised in the magazines. She obliged, seemingly pleased with this development. My hair, now past my shoulders, was softer, shinier. I learned to style it, sometimes straight, sometimes with a bit of a wave. I started to understand which colors suited Melissa's complexion, which styles of dresses were more flattering, even on my boyish frame. It was a deeply unsettling process. Part of me was horrified by this internal shift, this gradual erosion of Mike, but another, darker part of me found a strange sort of solace in the transformation. If I could make Melissa pretty, maybe the experience wouldn't be so unbearable. Maybe if I looked the part convincingly enough, people would stop staring, stop laughing. One afternoon, I was in my room, Melissa's room, as Mom now called it, trying on a new dress, a simple navy blue skater dress Mum had picked up. It actually wasn't too bad. I was attempting to apply eyeliner, trying for a subtle cat-eye effect I'd seen in a tutorial, when I heard a tap on my window. I jumped, startled, nearly poking my eye out. Standing on the porch roof outside my second-story window was Lily. Lily Chen. She was 17, lived 3 houses down, and was, in a word, cool. Piercings, an ever-changing hair color, currently electric blue, and an air of not caring what anyone thought. We'd never really spoken beyond polite nods. My heart hammered against my ribs. She could see me, full makeup, dress, everything. This was it. The ultimate exposure. She just raised an eyebrow. "Nice eyeliner," she said, her voice surprisingly normal. "But you're holding the pencil wrong. You'll get a better wing if you angle it from the outer corner of your eye towards the end of your eyebrow." I stared at her, dumbfounded. No mockery, no disgust. "Can I come in?" she asked. "It's kinda precarious out here." Numbly, I unlatched the window and helped her climb inside. She sat on my bed, looking around at the dresses hanging on my closet door, the makeup scattered on my dresser. "So," she said, finally meeting my eyes, "what's the story? Mike, or is it Melissa now?" The directness of it, the lack of judgment, disarmed me, and for the first time in months, I told someone. Not everything, not the shoplifting, not the full extent of Mum's threats, but enough. I told her about the punishment, about being forced to live as Melissa. Lily listened patiently, her expression thoughtful. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she said, "Your mom's got some serious issues. You know that." "Tell me about it," I said, a bitter laugh escaping me. "But hey," she continued, a small smile playing on her lips, "if you're gonna be Melissa, you might as well rock it, right?" I blinked. "What?" "Look," she said, standing up and walking over to my dresser. She picked up an eyeshadow palette. "This shade of blue would actually look amazing with your eyes. And that dress. It needs a belt. Cinch the waist a bit. And those shoes are tragic. Honey." Over the next few weeks, Lily became my secret ally. She'd sneak over, sometimes through the window, sometimes boldly through the front door when Mum was out, claiming she was borrowing sugar. She taught me makeup tricks, how to properly blend foundation, how to make my eyes look bigger, how to choose lipstick shades that didn't make me look like a washed-out corpse. She helped me pick out clothes from the piles Mum brought home, showing me how to pair things, how to accessorize. She didn't treat Melissa as a joke, or as something shameful. She treated it like a project, an art form. Almost. It was confusing. Part of me, the Mike part, was still screaming in protest. But another part, the Melissa part that was slowly, insidiously taking root, was grateful for Lily's help. She made Melissa feel less like a punishment and more like a persona, a carefully constructed identity. She even helped me find a better wig, a soft brown one that looked more natural than the cheap blonde monstrosity. The crisis of identity was deepening. Who was I anymore? Was I Mike, forced into a dress, or was I becoming Melissa? Someone who was starting to understand the nuances of eyeliner and the flattering cut of an A-line skirt. Lily's acceptance, her non-judgmental guidance, was a strange kind of lifeline. But it was also pulling me further into Melissa's world, a world I was increasingly unsure I wanted to leave, even if I could. The lines were not just blurring, they were starting to disappear. Life settled into a bizarre, fractured routine. At Northwood High, I was still Mike, albeit a more withdrawn, haunted version of my former self. The incident in the park with Mark, Kevin, and Josh had spread like wildfire. Whispers followed me down the halls. "That's the kid who wears dresses. Freak! Panty boy!" I ate lunch alone, avoided eye contact, and counted the minutes until I could escape back to the strange sanctuary prison of my home. My old friends now treated me with a mixture of fear and contempt. Sarah Jenkins from math class would sometimes give me a pitying look, but mostly, she just avoided me like everyone else. At home, I was Melissa, and Melissa, under Lily's tutelage and my own strange drive for perfection, was becoming more polished. Mum seemed pleased. She'd comment on how ladylike Melissa was becoming, how pretty her makeup looked. There was a possessive pride in her voice that chilled me to the bone. One rainy Saturday afternoon, Mum was at a library conference, and Danny was at a friend's house. Lily had come over, and we were experimenting with a new smoky eye look in Melissa's room. Lily was a whiz with makeup brushes, her touch light and precise. "You know," Lily said, concentrating on blending my eyeshadow, "your mom is really invested in this whole Melissa thing. It's more than just a punishment, don't you think?" I'd had the same uneasy feeling for months. The initial shoplifting incident seemed like a distant, almost insignificant catalyst for the all-consuming reality that had become my life. "I don't know," I mumbled. She's always been controlling. This is next level controlling. Mike! Or Melissa. Whatever. Lily finished the eye, stepped back, and nodded approvingly. Okay, that looks killer. Now, I need to find a bobby pin. Mine just snapped. She started rummaging through the drawers of the old vanity Mum had moved into my room. Melissa's dressing table. It was full of Mum's old costume jewelry, scarves, and makeup odds and ends. As Lily sifted through a drawer filled with tangled necklaces and forgotten brooches, her hand brushed against a false bottom. What's this? She murmured, prying it up. Beneath it was a small, rose-patterned tin box. It looked old. What is it? I asked, curious. Lily shrugged and opened it. Inside, nestled on faded velvet, were a few items: a lock of baby-fine blonde hair tied with a blue ribbon, a tiny silver locket, a birth certificate, and a handful of faded photographs. Lily picked up the birth certificate. Melissa Ann Henderson. She read aloud. Born March 12th. Wait a minute. She looked at the year. This Melissa would be older than me, by a lot. My heart began to pound. I took the photos from her. They showed a little girl, blonde, blue-eyed, with a mischievous grin. In one, she was about 5 years old, proudly holding a daisy. In another, she was on a swing, her hair flying. And in that little girl's face, I saw an eerie, undeniable resemblance to my mother and, chillingly, to the Melissa my mother was trying to create in me. Who is this? Lily whispered, looking from the photos to me. I didn't know. Mum had never mentioned another child. I was an only child, or so I'd always believed, before Danny came along from her brief second marriage, driven by a sudden, urgent need to know. I led Lily to Mum's bedroom, a place I rarely entered. Her closet was meticulously organized. At the very back, on the top shelf, was a locked wooden chest. I'd seen it before but never paid it much mind. Now, it seemed incredibly significant. We need to open this, I said, my voice tight. Lily, ever resourceful, produced a bobby pin from her hair and went to work on the simple lock. It clicked open. Inside was a treasure trove of a forgotten life, baby clothes, tiny shoes, worn teddy bears, and more photos, hundreds of them, it seemed. Photos of the blonde girl, Melissa Ann Henderson, from infancy to about age 5. There were photos of her with a younger version of my mum, Diane, and a man I didn't recognize, presumably Melissa Ann's father, Mum's first husband. And then, at the bottom of the chest, we found a small, leather-bound diary, Mum's handwriting. The entries were dated over 20 years ago. With trembling hands, I opened it. The early entries were full of joy, chronicling the birth and early years of her daughter, Melissa. Melissa took her first steps today. Melissa said Mama. Then, the tone began to change. Entries about doctor's visits, hushed worries. And then, the final, devastating entry. October 14th. The worst day. My beautiful Melissa is gone. The car. It was so fast. I couldn't stop it. My baby. My little girl. She was only 5. How can I go on without her? A part of me died with her today. A wave of nausea hit me. I sat down hard on the floor, the diary slipping from my fingers. Lily picked it up, her face pale. Oh my God, Mike, she breathed. Your mom. She had another daughter, named Melissa, and she died. The pieces clicked into place with horrifying clarity. The punishment. The name Melissa. The increasingly feminine clothes and mannerisms she was forcing on me. The strange satisfaction in her eyes when Melissa looked particularly convincing. The way she'd coo. My Melissa. She wasn't just punishing me for shoplifting. She was trying to replace her dead daughter. She was trying to resurrect Melissa Ann Henderson, using me as the unwilling vessel. This wasn't about teaching me a lesson. It was about filling a gaping, grief-stricken hole in her own life, in the most twisted, psychologically damaging way imaginable. The depth of her delusion, her quiet, methodical madness, was terrifying. I wasn't Michael being turned into a girl. I was Michael being erased, subsumed by the ghost of a child who had died 2 decades ago. Just then, we heard the sound of Mum's car pulling into the driveway. Panic flared. We scrambled to put everything back, shoving the diary and photos into the chest, locking it, and racing back to my room, stuffing the little tin box back under the false bottom of the vanity. We barely made it before Mum called out, "Melissa, dear, I'm home. I brought you a lovely new hair ribbon." Lily slipped out the window just as Mum opened my bedroom door. "Oh, Melissa, there you are. What have you been up to, sweetie?" she asked, smiling, holding up a pink satin ribbon. I looked at her, at the pleasant maternal mask she wore, and for the first time, I saw the profound, unacknowledged grief and the terrifying obsession lurking beneath. The punishment wasn't arbitrary. It was a meticulously crafted, deeply personal delusion. A few days later, Mum casually dropped another bombshell. "Melissa, I've been thinking. Northwood High isn't really the right environment for a sensitive young lady like yourself, or those rough boys. I've been looking into St. Catherine's Academy for Girls. It's a lovely school. You'd make so many nice, proper friends there. St. Catherine's, an all-girls school. The final step in her plan. If I went there, Mike would cease to exist entirely. Even at school, I would be Melissa." 7. The thought was suffocating. I had to get out. I had to escape before she succeeded in completely erasing me. The discovery of Melissa Ann hadn't just been shocking. It had given me a terrifying glimpse into the abyss of my mother's mind, and I knew I couldn't let her drag me down with her. The St. Catherine's brochures started appearing on the kitchen counter. Mum talked about application deadlines and entrance exams with an unnerving enthusiasm. The walls were closing in. I knew I couldn't stay. The discovery of the original Melissa, of Mum's tragic past and her twisted coping mechanism, had changed everything. It wasn't just about my humiliation anymore. It was about her sanity. And mine. Lily was my only hope. "You have to get out of there," she said, her usual breezy demeanor replaced by a grim urgency when I told her about St. Catherine's. "She's not going to stop." "But where can I go?" I asked, despair lacing my voice. "Dad basically disowned me." "We have to try him again." Lily insisted. "He needs to know the whole story. Not your mom's manipulated version, and not your terrified, coerced lies." So, we hatched a plan. It was risky, desperate. Lily had an older cousin who owed her a favor and had a car. The plan was for me to pack a bag with my boy clothes, the few I still had, hidden away at the back of my closet, and whatever essentials I could grab. Lily's cousin would pick me up a few blocks away from my house early one morning, before Mum woke up, and drive me to the bus station. From there, I'd take a bus to Oregon, to Dad. The night before the escape, I couldn't sleep. I lay in bed, dressed in one of Melissa's nightgowns, listening to the sounds of the house, my heart pounding. What if Mum woke up? What if Dad wouldn't listen? What if he turned me away again? But the alternative, St. Catherine's, the complete annihilation of Mike, was even more terrifying. At 4:00 a.m., my alarm vibrated silently under my pillow. I slipped out of bed, my movements practiced and quiet. I changed into jeans, a t-shirt, and a hoodie. Clothes that felt like a forgotten second skin. They smelled faintly of mothballs and freedom. I grabbed my backpack, took one last look at Melissa's room, the frilly dresses, the makeup, the lingering scent of gardenias, and crept out. Lily was waiting by the corner, a small anxious shadow in the pre-dawn gloom. Her cousin's beat-up sedan was idling nearby. "You got this," Lily whispered, giving me a quick, fierce hug. "Call me when you get there." The bus ride was long and agonizing. With every mile that passed, I felt a strange mixture of relief and terror. I was free from Mom, but I was heading towards an uncertain future. What if Dad still saw me as the daughter Mum had presented? When I finally arrived in Portland, I took a cab to Dad's address, the fare eating up most of my remaining cash. His small suburban house looked unfamiliar, unwelcoming. I rang the doorbell, my hand shaking. He opened the door, dressed in a faded flannel shirt, a coffee cup in his hand. He looked tired. When he saw me, really saw me. Mike, in boy's clothes. My hair unstyled, no makeup, his eyes widened. "Mike, what on earth are you doing here? How did you get here?" "Dad," I choked out, the words tumbling out in a rush. "You have to listen to me, Ahana. Mom, she's not well. It's not what you think. It was never what I wanted. She made me." And I told him everything. About the shoplifting, the initial punishment, the rules, the threats of the photos, about Danny's torment, about the horrific birthday party, the public humiliation in the park, about the forced persona of Melissa. And then, the hardest part, I told him about the other Melissa, his ex-wife's deceased daughter, and my horrifying realization that Mom was trying to replace her. He listened, his expression shifting from confusion to shock, then to a dawning horror, and finally, to a deep, gut-wrenching guilt. When I finished, he just stared at me, his face pale. "Oh my God, Mike," he whispered. I had no idea. I just thought, Diane can be so convincing. And you said, she threatened me. Dad, she said she'd send pictures to everyone at school if I didn't say I liked it. Tears were streaming down my face now. Tears of anger, relief, and exhaustion. He pulled me into a hug. A real hug. Strong and protective. "I'm so sorry, son," he said, his voice thick with emotion. "I should have known. I should have fought for you. I failed you." Just as a fragile sense of hope began to bloom. Dad's phone rang. It was Mum. He put it on speaker. Her voice, usually so controlled, was frantic. "Robert, is Michael there?" "He ran away. My poor Melissa. She's so confused. You have to bring her back to me. She needs me." "Diane," Dad said, his voice firm. "Mike is here, and he's staying here. What you've been doing to him is... it's sick." "Sick," she shrieked. "I'm trying to help her. She wants to be Melissa if you don't bring my daughter back. Robert, I swear I'll call the police. I'll tell them you kidnapped her. I'll sue for full custody." The threat hung in the air. Dad looked shaken but resolute. "He's my son, Diane. And he's not going back to that madhouse." He hung up. The next few days were a whirlwind. Dad got a lawyer. Mum made good on her threat and called the police, accusing Dad of kidnapping. Child Protective Services got involved. It was a mess, but through it all, Dad stood by me. CPS assigned a social worker, Ms. Evans, who recommended I see a therapist. Her name was Dr. Ramirez. She was kind, patient, and didn't seem fazed by any part of my story. In her quiet office, filled with plants and soft lighting, I slowly began to unpack the trauma of the past year. "Mike," Dr. Ramirez said one day, after several sessions, "what your mother did was a severe form of psychological abuse. She was trying to erase your identity to cope with her own unresolved grief. It wasn't your fault. None of it." Hearing those words, abuse, not your fault, was like a dam breaking inside me. She helped me understand the confusion I felt about Melissa. It's understandable that parts of that persona might have become integrated, she explained. It was a survival mechanism. You poured a lot of energy into being Melissa. It doesn't mean you are Melissa, or that you want to be a girl. It means you're a resourceful young man who did what he had to do to cope with an unbearable situation. The legal battle was ugly, but the evidence of Mom's delusion, the photos of the original Melissa, her frantic voicemails, my testimony today was overwhelming. Eventually, a judge granted Dad full custody and ordered Mom to undergo intensive psychiatric evaluation and therapy. She was also issued a restraining order. The ending wasn't neat or tidy. The whispers at Northwood High didn't magically disappear when I eventually, cautiously, returned for a new school year. Living with Dad, he found a job transfer back to our home state. Some people were still cruel, but some, like Sarah Jenkins, who had heard bits and pieces of the true story, offered quiet support. Lily remained my staunchest ally, a true friend who had seen me at my worst and never judged. Danny, surprisingly, apologized. He'd been scared and confused by Mom's behavior too. He admitted and had acted out of his own fear and powerlessness. Our relationship slowly began to heal. As for Melissa, it was complicated. Dr. Ramirez was right. Forcing myself to be her had changed me. Sometimes, in the privacy of my room, I'd look at a fashion magazine or sketch a dress design, not because I wanted to be a girl, but because that part of my life, however twisted its origins, had happened. It was a part of my story. I was Mike, unequivocally, but I had also been Melissa. And in a strange way, surviving Melissa had made Mike stronger, more empathetic, and more determined to live life on his own terms. The dresses and makeup were packed away, symbols of a dark chapter. But the resilience, the unexpected creativity I'd discovered, and the understanding of human fragility, those were things Melissa had, in her own strange way, given to Mike, and Mike was learning to live with all of it. The future was uncertain, but for the first time in a long time, it felt like my own.